In this section, we're going to go over all the materials that we'll need to construct our freestanding maquette sculpture. So first, and probably most importantly to the section coming up, is the wire. This is pre-packaged armature wire that you can get at any hobby store. So Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Joann's might even have some of this. Anywhere where you'll find the polymer clay, which we'll go cover in a second, you'll probably find these nearby. Now, you don't have to get these. These are a little overpriced for the amount that you're getting, but any hardware store will have aluminum or steel wire that you could use for these same purposes. In order to shape those, I'm going to be using a pair of little old pliers here. Anything will do. Like having a needle nose with a little snip in it, like this right here, is kind of very, very useful here. These are just going to be more for like holding and locking in something in place, while I use this secondary one to bend certain areas with more care. And then we'll just use a couple of steel screws. So even though we're screwing into wood, we're going to use steel. Basically, these are supposed to go through sheet steel. So what we like about these is that it has this little like mushroom shape here where it's going to clamp down that onto the piece of wood. But that'll become more clear when we get there. But we need 2 of these. And then, of course, we have our polymer clay. So this is just your standard issue, very simple polymer clay. I didn't want to use anything very special. I just wanted it to be something that is just easily purchasable by just about anyone at almost any location. So I have the Super Sculpey here that comes in this beige color. And then I'm also going to go over how to basically create your own blends of special colors by mixing other ones. So I'm going to go for kind of like a skin tone that's similar to mine. So since I'm a little darker than this beige here, I got another shade darker here, and then some accent colors to kind of pick up some of these like more olive tones. And then I'm going to mix with a little bit of this here as well. So I'll go into mixing here in a moment, but this is just your normal Sculpey, nothing too special there. And then underneath our Sculpey, we're going to use aluminum foil. This is just going to save us a little bit of material as we go forward. So it's essentially going to beef up our wire armature so that we don't have to use as much polymer clay. Polymer clay also does have this general rule where 1/4 of an inch, it says back here some more directions, but 1/4 of an inch is kind of what you want, no more than that. You can make certain areas thicker, but more often than not, you want to stay at 1/4 inch all the way around the figure and not exceed that. So the aluminum foil allows us to, achieve that. Oh, I almost forgot here. So we're just going to do a normal screwdriver here. So this is just a hand screwdriver. You can do, an electrical one. It's just a little overkill. So these steel threads here do a really great job on the wood. So just a hand one with a little bit of pressure, you should be able to self screw it down. So one of these will come in handy. And even though I have, quite a bit of tools and specialty tools, I'm mainly going to be using what I call pushers. So like these handles here, just to push clay around. There are some of these that are rubbery. I don't use these as much, but some people that really work with polymer clay a lot really like using these. And then they also like to use metal tools to push polymer clay around. Wood tools kind of do the same job. So as long as you have something kind of almond shaped like this, so it's kind of like the back of your thumb, you want a tool that can mimic that. So that's what these do. And then we have some loop tools to very strategically pull clay across the surface, maybe put in some wrinkles, and then some small little tight ribbon tools like this one to really gouge the clay. So nothing too special. These are ball stylus tools as well, just to get into a little harder to reach areas to smooth areas out. But we'll go more into these in detail as we go. But I'm not going to be using any super expensive tools. You can basically get almost all of these tools even in that same aisle where you'll get the Sculpey. There'll be like a little kit. It covers just about all of those. So with all that covered, let's begin. So first, we're going to construct our wire support system of our armature. Basically, it's almost the entirety of the armature, really. And we're going to go about this in a way that I do it often, but I don't always do it the same way. So I sometimes will go here and then make another piece here and then coil the middle with another piece that goes along this interior leg and then over to the arm here, and then I'll make a loop for the head. This time we're going to go ahead and go from leg to the head, coil in here, and then back out this leg. Essentially, we want to create the trunk of this figure, which is the one that I'm going to kind of sculpt. It's a little exaggerated right now, but we're going with this very basic humanoid character with no discernible features, just so that you have more of a clear understanding of how to begin one of these, and then you can apply these to a more complicated design of your own choosing. So I've already gone ahead and opened the other container of the more thick stuff. So this is still aluminum, very easy to bend stuff. Sometimes I'll go with steel, but for the purposes of this simplified video, I'm going to just do it a little easier on myself. This might wobble a little more than I would normally want, but for the point of making a quicker video, I think this more malleable material is actually quite nice to work with. So I'm going to take advantage of this here because it seems like it's doubly coiled, which is nice. And I'm going to make this the top of the head. So what I'm going to give myself is from up here, I'm going to give myself the length of his body and then some. So basically you have all the way up here and then a little bit more. I'm going to give myself quite a healthier amount more. Now, why is that? Because when I'm coiling, I'm going to lose some length. So I don't want to cut it really close. I want more than I need because we can always cut wire off. Adding wire is what's complicated, right? So I'm going to go ahead and measure it out and then give myself this nice extra bit. If there's some waste, that's okay. So now where I marked with my fingers, just going to use these snips here. And it cuts pretty easily because it's aluminum. If it's steel, it would probably give you a bit more resistance, but it's not too hard. So now this area up here, I'm going to clamp down and then twist it. And I'm using this to hold that in place so it doesn't twist around on me. I'm just going to start making a nice little braid. Now I'm going to check it against this. And I want this to be like in the middle of the head here. So I got a ways to go still. I'm going to check it again. So you see how here I'm in the middle of the head more or less. And here I'm almost all the way down here to where the clay will be. I'm not going to go all the way down to here to the groin. From here I'm going to loop up and then go back down. So I'm going to go like this. Start to bend a little like pelvic area. And notice again, I'm not taking this all the way to the extreme because remember we're adding a little bit of foil and then we're adding clay on that. So we need the space. Almost like we want to do the bones on the inside. So now that I have that, I'm pretty satisfied. And then I have quite a bit extra here. I'm going to leave that there for now. Now I'm going to make my next piece so that I can put in the arms. Because I want the arms to add to the torso here, that is going to reinforce the torso. So I might as well use each arm to reinforce the legs as well. So now how am I going to do that? Well, now that I have this here, I'm going to get basically the height of the figure. So if I can move this up here, the height of the figure, I'm going to basically go a little bit more than the height. Something like that. I'm going to cut that. And then I'm going to measure from here to there to about the middle here, because remember we want to leave room for the rest of the clay and the interior foiling, right? So I want it to go on the inside now. Some people go, do I go to the fingertip? No, for like this thicker stuff that's going to be the arm, I like to give myself like an indication that this is where the wrist will be. See, like that. And then later I can either cut that or add a hand to that if I really wanted to be so detailed. So I'm coming around here, right here, I'm going to bend. So I've got that. And I have this in place. You see how this is still pretty much right there? Now that I have this in place, I'm making a mark right here with my finger. Then I'm bringing this over here. Then I'm going to check again where it should cross. Remember, it's good to measure twice and bend once. So it should be about right here. So now that I've started bending it, I'm going to use the pliers to hold it in place and bend around. So you see how it's wobbling? It's no problem. I'm basically going to go in here and then reduce the space between them by really clasping down. This process is called crimping. So now that that's a little stronger, I can go ahead and manually add it here. And when it comes down here, I'm going to add it to the leg. So notice that when I put it back, see how this is out here? So not a big problem. I gotta bend it a little bit more. So now I'm gonna check it again. That's better. See how it's inside? And then I could bend a little mark for the elbow there. And now I'm going to do the other side. And you notice this here only went to about like just over the knee. I'm going to make sure that this time I give myself a little more because ideally this would have kept going beyond what we needed. But we're going to make do with our little mistake. So it's okay. So this time I'm going to give myself this much. So here we go again. There's this little wrist here. So I'm going to go right here. See, I started the twist. Then I'm going to try to lock it in place there. By that first loop, I'm going to clasp it together. I'm holding it here, and then I'm using the leverage to pull this across, just to start really building some strength here in the middle. So it's a little shaky. So we're going to crimp it again. So here, and this works more with aluminum than with steel. Steel is a little harder. So you see that gap in between there? I'm going to clasp that so it kind of grips onto itself. Ready? So I missed there. And then when I go like that, you see how there's very little air in between there? So now that's not going anywhere. And I think this time I will have enough to go all the way down with the leg. Ideally, you want this to happen on both sides. So now it looks like I have enough on both. Starting to move a little on me, so just repose it. It's not a big deal. So because here is a little bit of a mess up, I have to add just a little bit more just to continue that strength on this leg, because I want them to be pretty equally strengthed out. So here I'm going to bend it, weigh it down at the base to where the bottom of the heel would be. So I know he has like these two long tendrils here, but we're going to cut one of them away. But it's just so we have the height right there. Okay, so we have that. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more to this leg. Again, to just add a little bit of strength. So I need to make sure that I fix this into here. So that braid that ended there, I'm just going to add to it. Okay, so now this is a little stronger here. This is a little off. So I'm just going to crimp it into itself like that. It's okay, it's all going to get covered up anyway. I just want to make sure that this doesn't shake. So what I'm doing is I'm crimping it right there. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. It looks like it has a little extra bend there. I think I can still manage it. So right here, twist it forward. Okay. It's a little skewed off, but it's okay. I can correct that. Just make sure everything's where you want it to be. So there, I feel pretty happy with that. And now this, I'm going to cut one of them away. But first I'm going to loop just the end. So this is what I mean by loop. I'm going to make almost like a little circle, right? Then I'm going to do the same with the other side. Over the top of it. So you see that? See how they're like right on top of each other? And then using the pliers, I'm going to kind of flatten them on top of each other. And then I'm going to clasp the bottom so they overlap once again. And then this, I'm going to loop back up the heel. So I'm going to have to be really careful there. That's not the very thin. So don't loop it up like that. If your character has maybe very thin ankles, you can just cut the excess off. I'm just using what I have to just garner more strength. And then you would do this to just get rid of that excess you don't need. Then I'm using the flat part of the pliers to just flatten out that kind of like shoe that we've created. And now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. And what we want is, here is where we're going to put that washer and the screw. So now we have a almost freestanding figure on its own. So bam, and I'm going to check them against here. And we're ready to go. Before we do though, we could use this thinner stuff. So I'm going to take this, get a nice little length of it. And this is good to use just to like make sure that none of these little areas, these joints, once you do that with one side, you can just coil it around. This offers a little strength and basically adhesion without using any actual glue to the strength of the leg. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. I'm going to coil around here, and I'm going to do the same thing with the arms. So it depends on the figure that you're creating. You might want to do this and then maybe go into a 5-pronged hand if it's important, like what position the hand is. You could use the smaller one for all the fingers if you really wanted to. I don't think I'm going to go that far. I think my hands will be like very close together, so I can just make it like all one surface. Okay, so that's feeling a lot more secure now. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I'm going to do a little bit more on the head and we'll be ready to go. It's always good to find an area where you can kind of put it through like if it was string, almost like threading a needle. So when you do that, you have the torque and the tension that is allowed by you bending around something that's already solid and established. So now that I did that, I can coil up on the neck, and all I want to do up here is add a little sphere, almost like a little circle. So it looks like this. I'm going to do another one. And some people make this look real pretty. It doesn't have to be. We're going to cover this entirely with foil. Something that's important is whatever you're doing up here to catch the foil, don't make it too large, because the last thing you want is for you to have no room for foil and then clay. The easiest thing to do is to make your figure have a really large head by accident. So always leave more room than you could even want to have for that. So now that I'm pretty happy with this, we're ready to move on to the next stage, which is putting it on this board here. So now that we have our skeleton built, we can now pose it on the base somewhere. I'm just going to keep the position pretty simple, but here you could anchor one point and then go ahead and animate them in whichever way you want. So if you want it to be like a running person, for example, you may anchor one foot to the middle and then have the rest of it kind of freeing in the air. And then that anchor point becomes that point by which you pose the rest of it. In my case, I'm just going to have a little wide set stance like this. And then arch his back here. So it's going to have more of an arch kind of posture, but I won't do any of that until these two are anchored. I know that this is about how far I want the legs to be, so I'm going to go ahead and anchor those down first. So I'm just going to choose an area here. I'm going to press down. It's going to take a second for it to grab, but eventually it will, and then the threads will allow you entry. I'm getting a little resistance there, so it's still on there. It could use a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and go like this. See how this is a little bit in my way? I can just bend them back a little bit, then finish up. If you find this too difficult, you could just use a power drill. That should be very easy at that point. So let's see here. Okay, let's say I like that. I also like where he's at on the base. So now I'm going to do the other one. This screw seems a little bit stripped, so I'm going to actually back it out. And I'm going to switch it for another one that I have on hand here. Sometimes when you reuse these, so I just pulled this off of another sculpture, it'll just get used to being kind of forced like that, and this one's a little stripped, so it's been a little hard to finish it up there. So I just have this on hand. It's a different color. It's still a steel screw, has the same threads. So now that'll go in. Same thing here. Until I can't twist anymore. Now it's pretty good. All this doubling up and tripling up a little bit here. It's making so that this doesn't move very much. So now we're good. Now what I'm going to do is find the posture. So I want this to bend back a little bit, the thigh to bend forward. A little arch in his back here. I want there to be kind of like this weight on the shoulders. Put a little bit of attitude here. And then I want the head to be looking down. And it's always good to exaggerate the pose slightly when it's in this wire stage, because once you put foil and clay all around, like, you can start to lose the dynamism pretty readily. So it's okay if you over exaggerate a little bit here. So like, what does that look like? See how it's a little bit like an S? So I want the knees to be like locked, which pushes this back. But if I just put clay kind of like in this line here, I can very easily lose that. So it's best to exaggerate it to remind myself what the intention is going forward. Like here, if I add a less clay here than I do here, I can straighten this back out by accident, but giving myself this like over dramatized stance is going to keep me on track to getting those postures and those planes that I want. And now here I'm noticing that this is a little longer than that one, so I'm just going to snip it. It's no big deal. And now he's ready to go. And the best thing about this is you can kind of change it as you start bulking it up.